My other daughter was born in 2021, so I was kind of blessed with. No, 2000.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, 2019. I can't do math.
I was like, what?
Welcome back to the Behind the Well Show. Roger Abel, your host, here with Elias, Randel. Eli, big news last week.
What's that? What's the big news? I thought all the news is big news.
No interest rate cut again.
Oh, yeah. Big news.
We've kind of known that, but I think we had a question from a listener who actually sent this in and just said, hey, what's it mean for me because there's no interest rate cut? And truth be told, for most people out there, it's business as usual, right? Borrowing costs are high. If you want to buy a house, if you have a credit card, if you have revolving credit, like you're paying a lot more in interest than you're used to. But outside of that, nothing's really changed.
No, and it's borrowing costs really aren't, they're high, but it's because of where we came from. It's probably historically still not that high, but but that's really not, everyone has recency bias and all that. So I think for the near future here, though, we're not going to have rate cuts. I guess inflation, which I don't know how, I don't think there's that many people that are surprised that inflation is being pretty persistent. I think most conversations I have, I think I've yet to have a conversation since this started where someone thought, yeah, I just think it's going to start getting better now. And it's a couple things. It's every time you get gas, every time you get groceries, you're reminded. And those energy and food's not, part of the measure that they're using in the data. But there's just a lot of other things. People are making more money. It's just going to be a bigger challenge. It's not going to get fixed yesterday, I guess, is kind of my point.
I think the other thing to remember is the last time we had this type of inflation, it was here for an extended period of time. I actually went and pulled a chart of inflation year by year. In 1977, inflation hit 6.7%, 9% in 78, 13 in 79, 12 in 1980, 8.9 in 1981, 3.8 in 1982. So really it took 6 years to kind of flush the system of the inflation we saw in the late 70s and early 80s. Well, we're really only like a year or two into this where we had this high inflation and now we're kind of fighting it. So I would expect that at some point, it's going to take a little time to flush out of the system, and we'll get back to a normal inflationary environment. I talked with a friend of mine the other day, and he just said, hey, do you think we're ever going to see mortgage rates at 3% again? And I said, I don't know. I said, possible, but I said, I don't think that's the likely base case scenario to get to 3, but could we get back to where mortgage rates are 4.5%, 5.5%, even 6% looks pretty good today, Elias. I think a lot of people would be happy if they could get a 6% mortgage rate today. But I think it's just, when you hear what the Federal Reserve is doing, you really don't need to get too excited about it from an individual investor standpoint. It doesn't really mean a lot for you. And many times the market's already priced in those rate cuts or rate increases, so that interest rate's already being reflected.
It is, and I want to get your take on my next question / comment, which I don't think, I know me for sure. I've never worked in an inflation environment like this since being in the business. You probably haven't really either, right?
Inflation's been non-existent for like 20 years for the most part.
Right.
My working career, I guess there's probably a little bit like in the 2000s. I'm going back. The last time inflation in my working career was over 4% was 2007. Otherwise, it's always run 3.5% or less.
Yeah, so I think one thing I've learned through this, and it seems like I think inflation bothers investors at times more than their accounts fluctuating. I think, it's probably partially because good investors expect fluctuations throughout time, but I think that's been a surprising thing to me is the feedback. It just really, I don't know if it's just because it's a constant reminder, right? Where I guess if market's not doing well, you can just not look at your accounts or open your statements, but you can't really hide from inflation. You know, you go get gas, you notice it. You go get groceries, you notice it. But I was interested on your take on that. I feel like inflation might bother people more than performance in their overall investments.
Oh yeah, I think you're right because they're using that item every day that they feel the pinch. You know, good investors not checking their account every day. I mean, I'm not saying you're a bad investor if you do, but you have to have some pretty good behavior if you can go look at your account balance every day and not want to make a change. So we always talk about good investor behavior. It's those who just kind of leave it alone. Well, you can't leave alone going to the grocery store, right? You have to buy that item. Yeah, I have a software that we utilize. Went from $42 a month to $92 a month. 1 year. Doubled in cost. It's a pretty critical software.
And doubled the price.
Doubled the price.
Wow.
And there's a lot of people listening who will know what that software is. I don't need to say, they'll figure it out. But a really popular software doubled the price. Which inflation. It is what it is, just going to pay. I mean, I'm sure just the cost of labor, the cost of technology, cost of chips, everything's gone up. I mean, I don't think there's anything that hasn't gone up in value. Or cost, I should say. Shouldn't even say value, just cost.
I know in the local area, farm fresh eggs have not gone up in price. So they used to be expensive, but now the $3 or $4 a dozen you pay for at the farm stand is like what you're going to pay at the grocery store anyway.
So I've got a great question.
So that's
for
the
you.
one thing I think. Yeah.
The organic fancy eggs before COVID were always $5. Why are they still $5 when the cheap eggs are now $4? They went up 8 times.
They had the margin.
You think they already had the margin built in?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if the cost for one egg farmer, assume they're similar cost, right? Proportionate cost, right? The organic farmer has a little bit higher cost. Probably there's certain different things they have to feed the chickens or whatever they do. Wouldn't their cost have went up as well? Like, if they are going to keep that same margin, shouldn't their cost have went up?
And okay, maybe that's the price that maybe if you price it higher, you can't sell enough. I don't know.
Well,
I'm sure they have a good reason, but I mean, at some point, you just won't buy it. Like if a dozen eggs is $15, you're not going to buy it. It's
but
$1 per egg. So if it's $12 for
so you think the organic egg farmers are just working on a smaller margin now?
I would assume. I mean, their price hasn't gone
the other
up.
egg farmers now just more profitable?
That's very possible too.
That's my
that consumers got used to a new price, and I don't know what their input. I don't know how much it costs.
Yeah,
to
I don't know
feed
either. That question's always baffled me.
What's a group of chickens called? It's not a herd. What is it?
I don't know.
A flock.
Probably.
I don't know I don't know what it costs to feed a flock of chickens.
Well, the only reason I think about it is we started buying those fancy eggs before it was popular. Like my wife always needed brown, cage-free organic eggs. Now I'm into the cheapest egg I can get.
Yeah. I mean, we have a neighbor. One of our neighbors sells eggs. They have chickens at the house. They're really good, so we buy them from there.
Do you know how you can find a good egg? Which one's good?
How
hard the shell is.
Oh, yeah, the farm eggs, they're much harder to crack than the store. Yeah.
Yeah, if I have a hard shell, I know it's a good egg. But anyway, yeah, so inflation, it's going to be here. I wouldn't expect that this is going away anytime soon. We're in a new normal. Don't get all excited about what the Fed actually decides to do. And we know it's pinching people. I mean, we've seen the data. The credit card balances hit all-time highs last year. Delinquencies are at 10-year highs on credit card balances. So there's just a lot of stuff out there, and it's doing two things. One, there was a study I just saw that was on ThinkAdvisor, and it was, they actually pulled some women and just said, hey, how do you feel about retirement? And they're not very positive about it. In fact, the female respondent said retirement's getting harder, and the number one reason is inflation. The number two reason, 77% of the respondents said inflation. Another 77% rising healthcare cost, and 70% said long-term care. So what's interesting is
and none of those things are going to get less expensive.
And none of those things actually have to do with retirement, like their actual monetary retirement accounts. Think about it. They didn't say retirement's harder because I don't have enough money in here. It's going to be hard because of all these other pressures on my budget.
Isn't that kind of saying the same thing?
Kind of, but when people think of like retirement, they think of the retirement dollars and money.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how one of the number one concerns of most people about retirement is their health care. Think about it. That when we go through the polling of people we ask, what are you concerned about? How many people say long-term care and health care?
High percentage.
Almost
Almost every young people, no. Well, unless they work in healthcare, they always bring it up. But people transitioning to retirement, almost every single family brings it up.
But I think even females have a higher propensity.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Guys are dumb. We don't think about stuff like that.
We get taken care of.
That's another way to put it.
So I just think there's all the inflation. It's putting pressure on people's retirement portfolios. It's putting pressure on their debt load that they have. And I just wonder if there's not families out there where you have one person in the family who's a spender and they're buying things and the other spouse doesn't know. Do you think people are?
Sure.
Do you think the percentage of people hiding their debt from their significant other is higher now than in the past because of inflation? Like they just can't get out of the pattern. So now, hey, their spouse used to know what their debt was, but now they have that secret credit card that nobody knows about. I'd be interested to know, because the other thing is with buy now, pay later. It'd be pretty easy to hide what your debt is. Nobody knows what it is.
Buy now, pay later doesn't even count as debt.
It doesn't count as debt. It's just, well, we'll pay it when we can. And there's a lot of reasons, people hide their debt. I think if you think about, everybody knows being in debt's bad, right? I mean, I shouldn't say everybody, but the vast majority of people know that being in debt's bad. So why do they get there?
Buy now, pay later.
There you go. And then people hide it from other people. It's hard to work out of a problem if nobody knows. Otherwise, you have to figure your way out. But I think a lot of people hide this because of the fear of judgment. They're really, really worried about what society's going to think if they find out they didn't manage their money right, or their spouse or their kids or their parents. There's just all these different reasons that people kind of hide out from their problems.
There is. And, I think when you're thinking about debt and, I always, whenever this topic gets brought up, I think a lot about Dave Ramsey and the stuff he teaches, where, one of the reasons for his popularity is because so many people struggle with that problem. And he's really probably the biggest celebrity as far as helping people get out of debt. But there's just a lot of, there's probably some fundamental things that happen that get you to that point. Maybe not living on a budget, living beyond your means, keeping up with the Joneses, whatever it may be. But, at the end of the day, really the only real solution would be to figure out a way to fix the problem and then execute that strategy to get it fixed. And life is easier if you don't have any car payments and you don't have student loan payments. And you're probably going to have a mortgage for a long time unless you're really, really focused on having zero debt all the time. But but it's much easier to manage a budget without those extra liabilities going out every month.
I agree with that. And when people aren't honest with someone in their family about it, it starts to damage relationships. It starts to have a mental kind of toll on that person. So if someone out there's struggling with debt, you got to find a confidant that you can go say, hey, here's my problem. There's financial coaches, there's financial advisors. Maybe you're not comfortable going to your spouse. You got to sit down with somebody and figure out, hey, how are we going to tackle this problem? Because it doesn't go away. Debt's one of those problems that unless you take responsibility, it just gets worse. It's a compounding problem. Yeah. Especially now. If you have a credit card and you don't figure it out, it gets worse and worse and worse. What is it if you make a minimum payment on a credit card? It takes like 26 years to pay it off.
I'm sure. I have no
idea. Think about that.
But yeah, you're never going to pay it off on the minimum payment.
Elias, I think one thing we can do as good investors, savers, stewards of money is try to learn from other people who've done it, learn from the retirees. And I think there's actually a lot of stuff we can learn from the retirees that we work with and that other people's work with. And what got me thinking about this is Medicare FAQ released the results of a survey conducted in which researchers asked Americans to reflect on their transition out of work. And I think you'll agree with this. What people envision as their transition out of work in the first, 1 to 5 years in retirement and what actually happens many times are two different things. Some people have regrets. Some people wish they would have done things different. And I think it ought to be kind of good to talk about some of those things. There's, we've seen this in this office, situations where people retire and the retiree or their spouse dies shortly thereafter retirement.
Which is very sad. But
yeah, it is. It's super sad, but we see this stuff happen all the time. One of the things that stood out to me in this study, 26% of retirees have regrets, which that actually I think is pretty low. I mean, think about that. Like 75% of the people are like, yeah, I don't have too many regrets. But here's what's interesting. The number one reason of those retirees said they had regrets, their biggest regret was not saving enough money or prioritizing finances, 78% of the people.
Yeah, that's a high amount. And I think, that I kind of take that number with a grain of salt a little bit because I do think even good savers probably think, I probably could have done a little bit better because everyone knows, like, you're not saving everything you absolutely could. But I think even when the reality of retirement's kind of just like staring at you, you're probably thinking, I probably could have saved another $50 a month along the way and maybe I'd feel better. Some of that's probably just due to it's scary going from working to not working. But then we both know there's a lot of people who just their savings isn't adequate for their lifestyle, right? So they have to continue working.
I think that's a good point you make. As human beings, we like to move the goalpost on ourselves, or a lot of people do, not everybody. Like, oh yeah, well, I got the $1 million saved. Now I need $2 million. Okay, I got $2 million. I need $5 million. Like you said, that's why they said, hey, we could have saved more. The second one I actually think is a younger person. I'm not young anymore, but younger. You're younger than I am. 52% regret not prioritizing their health, which, I think it's easy to let your lifestyle get away from you when you're young, because you're kind of bulletproof. Not a whole lot goes wrong. You don't get sick. But as you get older, you're like, man, I wish I would have not had the extra 20 pounds. Maybe I could be more mobile in retirement. And I think that for me, whether people admit that or not, I think a lot of people look back and say, hey, I could have done this differently and had a better quality of life. You know, we talk about those 3 phases of retirement, the go, the slow go, and the no-go. If you don't take care of your health, your slow go is going to come sooner rather than later, likely. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people, the extra weight you carried, or, you know, not getting the appropriate
amount of sleep.
Yeah, sleep, or not getting your foot fixed, and it leads to another problem and another problem. I think I'm actually surprised that's not higher, but anyway. 60% of the retirees in the survey said they didn't start saving early enough. I mean, that's just a common theme, and I think that goes back to what you said, Elias. We all know the things we could have done better with money, and the easiest one to say is, I wish I would have started earlier, because that equates to more with minimal impact. Mm-hmm. I mean, just think if we could get people the day they get their first job to start saving 10% of their check or 15% of their check.
Probably all you'd ever have to do.
Yeah. Especially if, let's say your first job was at the local supermarket. He said, hey, I'm taking 10% of my check. Well, that's a home run. You're going to be wildly successful if you start at 16 saving 10% of your check. And it's going to allow you.
I doubt there's anyone. If you started saving 10% of your income at 16, I doubt. Like, that's not adequate.
Do you know
when you're in your 50s and 60s?
Here's the cool thing about if somebody did that. And I think this is the thing. Maybe this is how we need to position it for young people to understand how this really works. If you started doing 10% of your check immediately when you got your first job, right? And let's say you started working at 16, I don't know, 18, it doesn't really matter. What it's actually going to allow that individual or family to do later in life is actually enjoy their lifestyle during their working years versus playing catch up. The people who waited 20 years, guess what they have to do? Now when they're actually making real money, they got to play catch up. And did they really have the extra lifestyle they had from age 22 to 35? Was it really worth it?
No.
It wasn't, because now they're in their 50s. They haven't saved anything. Now they're making money when they could enjoy their lifestyle, but they're playing catch up because they didn't do anything when they were 28 years old. And it could have been a small change. Maybe that's how we need to position this to young people to get them going. It's not about today. I mean, great. You're making $70,000, let's say. You want to enjoy life when you're making 70 grand or when you're making 150, and you don't have to save exponentially more because you started doing this when you were 25.
Easier said than done, but yeah, that would work. That would work great for a lot of people.
Work great for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing that came to light in this survey is 1 in 10 retirees delayed retirement, and they cited a bunch of reasons, but here's one of the cool ones, and this was unexpected for me. Almost 50% of the people said they simply enjoyed working. And if you enjoy working and it's not affecting the retirement of your spouse or your family, I think that's a noble thing to do. We have a client who's 74, 75. He just enjoys working. Like, he likes his job. He doesn't know what he would do. His wife's been retired, but he just goes and does his job. He likes the people he works with. He likes what he does. Doesn't really want to retire.
Well, and that probably, you know, when you work, it gives you a lot of purpose in life. And, you know, once you retire, you still need things to drive you and things you're excited about. And if you can't picture yourself not working, then a lot of times the people will end up just continuing to work, especially if they enjoy it.
I think it's a cool thing that the biggest reason people delayed retirement was a personal choice.
Yeah, it's almost 50%. That's pretty high.
When you think about it, because the second highest was 38% didn't have enough money saved. I I feel like that would be flipped. But I think it's good. People are choosing to work longer based upon what they like to do versus what they have to do. 90% of retirees enjoyed being retired. I understand that. I actually could see, 90% is pretty high to be happy. I still think, I don't know.
Most
That
retired
surprised
folks
me.
I know really enjoy it. I don't know that many people who are retired and they say, no, I want it.
That's true. I called my dad the other day to see how he was liking retirement, and he's kind of like semi-retired, right? He teaches some virtual classes, and I think he's having a lot of fun. He got to go fishing with me the other day because he didn't have to work, and we're going another afternoon this week because he doesn't have to work, and normally
Right.
he'd be
He'd
teaching
be
classes, and then he's getting home at 5 o'clock, and he's got to do all the daily routine, which prevents you from doing the other stuff. So I think my dad, he probably falls into this. He's really happy that he did it.
Yeah, I have a friend who's retired at 55, and so he's going at the beginning of this year. No, I asked him, do you miss work at all? He goes, not one bit. But he officiates football, so that's how we became friends through that. He runs the trap shooting club in his community, right? He's still busy. He's doing things, but he's only doing his hobbies now instead of having to go work somewhere.
Yeah, that's cool. 82% of retirees now prioritize health. You know what I think this leads to? They have the time to do
Yes,
it. I think
function of
it's
time.
when you think about the stresses of life and health, it's really hard to say, yeah, I've got 2 or 3 kids. I got to go work a full-time job. I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. Like I commend the people who can live a super healthy lifestyle with 3 kids and 2 full-time jobs. Seriously, it's hard. I work out a
not
little
me.
bit. Well, we're fortunate though. We can go work out at 9 o'clock in the morning. If we have
Yeah.
all of our work done,
True.
we don't have to go to our boss and say, hey, I'm going to go get a workout. Now, that said, there's nights we're working until 8, 9 o'clock at night, but we can prioritize our health a little more than just a normal employee. I mean, if you have a husband and wife who both have 8 to 5 jobs, 2 or 3 kids, the option to work out is pretty slim unless you're really motivated to get up at 5 a.m., and that's really hard.
That it is hard.
Have you ever tried to do that for like 30 days?
I've been in a routine of working out in the morning when I was younger, but I don't use an alarm clock anymore. And so to get up by 5 a.m., I need an alarm clock, but I had to quit using it because let's say if I want to wake up at 5, I wake up at 5 and I have an alarm. For some reason, I'll wake up at 4. I always wake up like an hour before I want to, or if I just don't use one, I can kind of just wake up when I need to. Now, let's say like if I have to be at the airport early or something like that, I'm setting an alarm. I can't accidentally sleep in.
Dude, you have an alarm clock. You don't know it. It's
Well,
called
my
3
kids are up by 6:40.
That's your
Like the
alarm
latest I'm
clock.
going to sleep is 6:45 anyway, and I can
Yeah.
get anywhere I need to be.
That's exactly why you don't need an alarm clock.
Now, and I do, but to add to your point, yeah, it's just hard. It's challenging. And like today, I was up today and I was going to go for a walk, but and that's really easy. Like that's about the easiest exercise you can do is go for a walk. But I skipped it. I didn't feel like it. And then I was thinking, how come I don't feel like going this should be easy. But then I remembered all day Sunday yesterday, we did yard work. So my wife, like her new mission in life is to have the nicest yard in the neighborhood, which means I have to do yard work on the weekend, which is probably why when I woke up this morning, I didn't feel like doing anything because I was in the yard working all day yesterday. So, but between kids and everything else, whether it's activities, blah, 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 it's hard to have the time and it's hard to get up that early.
Well, since 2024 is our year of personalized advice, every week on this podcast, we're challenging a piece of common financial advice or financial myth. We discuss it. This week, we're going to talk about money and happiness. It's often said that money can't buy happiness. And while that's true to some extent, money's very ingrained in our life and our overall well-being. You know, there was a bank rate survey out there that found 42% of U.S. adults say money is negatively impacting their mental health. And you know, for those who don't know, May is Mental Health Month, and money has a big impact on your mental health. Have you seen this with any of your clients, or money drags down their mental health? Or
Well, I guess my overall thoughts, life is pretty challenging without having money problems. Most of our customers, typically by the time we start working with them, they have some good habits already established. So it's more about just kind of fine tuning. But okay, so the other day I was at the gas station getting gas. I had a guy approached me with a 2-gallon gas tank. He said, my gas tank's empty. I need to get to Iowa City. Will you fill this up for me? Just ask me. I would imagine like that guy's money situation negatively impacts his life.
he doesn't have the baseline.
Yeah, he doesn't have the baseline of just taking care of basic things. And I filled up his 2-gallon thing, and then I put some more gas in his truck. I just felt bad for him. And he was going, so he's at the gas. Think about this. He's at the gas station asking me for money. So then he can drive to Iowa City to borrow money from, it sounded like someone he's going to be working for, right? Because he needs to basically get essentially a line of credit from this person. Then he's going to go work it off on some projects, right? I didn't ask him a bunch of questions. I just helped him out a little bit. But I would imagine you don't even know if you can't drive down the road 30 miles because you can't afford the gas.
You're in a tough spot.
Yeah, that's got to be hard to deal with.
I think money and happiness, and we've heard this, I think it's Jordan Peterson. He's like a psychologist. So there's like a baseline of just the normal essential amount of money most people need to survive, have a decent life. And then above and beyond that, like happiness doesn't exponentially get better. Now, I think everybody believes that the more money you make, the happier you get, but that's not really the reality of it. Like, yeah, you get more stuff, you get nicer stuff, you get more experiences, but the true happiness level doesn't necessarily change. Is life easier? Potentially, but look at all the articles and things we see about how you get lifestyle creep into your life, and pretty soon you have a husband and wife making $500,000 and they can barely make ends meet.
Yeah, that's stressful.
So that's one side. Like, that's the traditional side. That said, when you do make more money, what I think it does for people, it maybe doesn't provide more happiness, but it provides more opportunity.
It does. More opportunity.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe more security for some people.
So while it doesn't buy
depending on how they view
happiness, it provides more opportunity. And what do I mean by opportunity? The opportunity to be more financially free, the opportunity to make an impact in your community, the opportunity to have more experiences, the opportunity to spend more time with your kids or your family because you can take the time off of work, or one spouse doesn't work because the other spouse is making enough money. Doesn't mean you're happier, but it does provide more opportunity.
Couldn't have said that any better. That was beautiful.
I rehearsed it all last night. No, I'm totally joking. I think, though, the people that get to that point, Elias, step back. Have you heard of the new movie out called King Richard?
No.
Okay, so it's the Serena and Venus Williams story.
Okay.
Their dad's name is Richard. You should watch it because I think when you correlate it to our business, in fact, we should do a podcast on this. And I'm not done with the movie yet. But before his daughters were born, he already had a game plan of how they were going to win Wimbledon. Like, he had already set, he had a game plan. Like, if you watch the movie, we have a plan. This is our plan. This is how we're going to do the plan. He had planned it all out, all the steps he'd try to plan, all along the way. Well, guess what happened? He executed the plan. It worked out. It's no different than somebody getting a financial plan, right? People that do exceptionally well with money, they don't luck into it. Most of them, there was a level of planning involved. Yeah, there's going to be some lucky breaks and stuff that happens, but most people planned. And it's really, I think, why we gravitate towards utilizing a financial plan for people and trying to plan different things out. I was having a discussion with my wife about saving for kids' college. And she goes, how did you actually figure out, because we've done a really good job saving for our kids' college to the point where I probably can scale back what I'm putting in. She goes, well, how did you figure out what to do? I said, well, I have a college planning module on my financial planning software. So I just went and did it, and then I executed it. And okay, I had a daughter born in 2016, so I was able to get a chunk of money in. And then I was blessed with some good markets for her, right? Okay, so I had another daughter born in 2019.
Yeah.
So once again, I got a bunch of money in during COVID, so they were blessed with, good markets. But ultimately, I just put a plan out there and executed it, do everything we talked to our clients about. I did a monthly ACH. I had an automatic annual escalator on it. So every year I contribute more and I don't have to think about it. And now I put myself and my family with this really good position that I have decisions to make. Like, do I keep funding these things? And I'm an 8-year-old. So I got 10 years to go, but I get to make the decision as to when I stop funding it versus, man, I got to start really hammering away in this thing. And it's all because of a plan. So if anybody out there hasn't done a financial plan, whether it's for your kids' college, your retirement, your vacation house, you can click the link in the description below. We'll help you. You can also go to btwellshow.com. We'd be happy to get you our one-page Premier Vision document, and that's at btwellshow.com. Elias, do you have any other takeaways for today's show?
Thanks for listening, everyone. We appreciate it.